welcome to my second video on murder mysteries. As you can tell, this is a different, backdrop, and that's because I had to move from the place I would originally film my films. So now I'm in a lounge, and it has a little bit of an echo, so sorry if you can hear that because I definitely hear it while I'm talking. But today I'm gonna do the case of the boy in the box, and this is also an older one, just like my Solder Family one that I just recorded. And it was set in February 1957 in Philadelphia, so in the United States. It's not a huge crime, like it's not very well known, but I looked it up and it's pretty well known within like Philadelphia and the East Coast. So this is a pretty disturbing story. So I just want to put in some content triggers such as like child abuse, murder, of course, and stuff like that. But yes, let me begin. So, just to give background to The Boy in the Box, it was set in February 1957, so it was like cold outside, rainy, in Fox Chase, Philadelphia, specifically in Susquehanna Road. I'm not sure if that road still exists, but that's what Wikipedia told me. What happened was a naked boy's body was found in a blanket, and it had like a Native American design on it, and that sort of becomes later or important later on in the story. It was found inside of a cardboard box, and the box was made for bassinets or like baby cribs, bought from JCPenney. The boy's hair was cropped really, really short, and it seemed like someone had just cut his hair because there's traces of like hair all over him still. And it was probably cut after death because like, why would you cut someone's hair and then kill them? He was probably dead and then they cut the hair. And his body was very malnourished, and he had multiple scars on him. So he had a scar on his ankle, near his groin, and an L-shaped one like under the chin. So his body had been laying there for probably a couple of days. Like no one's quite sure because like I said, it was February, so it was cold out. So bodies decompose slower in the cold. And it had also rained. So they're pretty sure it had been less than a week because it had rained, I think, the first week of February, and his body was found like the second week. And the cardboard box had no water damage, so they figured that like it was after the rainstorm had hit. And how it was discovered, or how he was discovered, I shouldn't refer to him as an it. How he was discovered was kind of sketchy. One day there was a young man checking for muskrat traps because he, I guess, liked to trap muskrats in the nearby rivers, or not rivers, like shrubs or whatever. And he had found the body, and he was like, "Oh my God!" Like I bet he was like super shook. Like, why wouldn't you be? But he didn't want to report it to the police because trapping muskrats was illegal at the time, or at least trapping them like in the city was illegal. So he never reported it. A few days later, after the muskrat trapper had found it, a college student was, I guess, walking nearby. He saw there was a rabbit, and it ran into the nearby brush, and he was all like, "Oh no, like I don't want this rabbit to die," because he knew there was like traps and stuff like that. I guess he had seen them when he was walking along the trail before. And he went to go find this rabbit, and he saw the dead body. And he was really scared too. He didn't report it at first, but he reported it the next day. He was nervous that he would somehow be tied to the case if he had reported it initially, but I guess he changed his mind. So then this giant case opened February 26 in 1957. The police began the investigation. At first, the police were super optimistic that this boy was going to be identified because, I'm not sure why they're optimistic, but I'm pretty sure they thought it was just going to be like a quick a quick discovery. The boy's fingerprints were taken. Back then, they didn't have like national DNA testing, so his DNA wasn't tested, but it later was, like, I think in 2008 or something like that, it was tested. They did a mass circulation of his picture across Philadelphia and near Delaware and all that. There was 400,000 flyers printed and distributed across Philadelphia, and it was included on every single gas bill in Philadelphia. So people in the city were seeing this picture of this boy. And uh, they didn't include the picture of his dead body, of course, because it was pretty graphic. It's online, you can find it. I don't recommend if you have like a weak stomach because it is pretty disturbing. But they had professional artists come in and paint what the child would have looked like if he was still alive. Interestingly enough, they painted him with short hair, even though there was hair like all covered over him, indicating that he had previously had long hair. So maybe that's a reason why people weren't able to identify the child. But we'll go into theories on that later on, why he had a haircut. So then, shortly after reports like were not coming in, 270 police academy recruits were sent to search the crime scene, and they found three discoveries. The first was a man's blue corduroy hat. The second was a man's white handkerchief with the letter G in the corner. And the third one was a child's scarf. The clues led absolutely nowhere. They included the clues in the flyers they sent out of like, hey, like this might lead to something. No one ever really like had a credible report. And yeah, that leads us into today, and the mystery is still unsolved. So there's some crazy theories. There's two big theories I want to talk about. The first one is the foster home theory. So both theories are like very, I would say, disturbing, very like intense. So get ready. So the foster home theory was that the boy lived at a foster home located 1.5 miles from where the body was found. So sounds about right. That's pretty credible. That like the foster home was nearby, so maybe like they transported it far enough away so it looked like it was unconnected to them. In 1960, Remington Bristow, he worked at a medical office. He contacted a psychic who described a house to him. And it was like a very specific house. I saw a picture of the house online. It's almost like a mansion. It's this brick, or I wouldn't say brick, it's like a stone gray house. It's very, very distinct. And the psychic, who was from a completely different city, had never been to Philadelphia before, described this house in detail. And Bristol like went toward the city, and he found the house, or he had an idea of where the house was. But to double check the psychic, he transported the psychic to Philadelphia, and he said, all right, if you're like the real deal, lead me to this house. And he actually had her at the site where the boy was found, and she went straight to where this foster home was. And it was the exact same home she had described. So that's pretty crazy. That's like a red flag in my head. And there was an estate sale happening. I don't know if it was at that exact same time or if it was later on, but it was nearby this time period. And Bristow saw a bassinet almost identical to the one from the box. Of course, like he wasn't sure if it was the exact same one found in the box, but this wasn't like a huge bassinet company that had like gone all over. It was from JCPenney, but the bassinet box from that JCPenney, there's only I think 8 sold or something like that. So like this bassinet was pretty specific to the nearby store. And he saw that bassinet that could have belonged to the box. Also, he looked at the clothesline at the foster home, and he saw that a lot of the blankets were very, very similar to the Native American printed one that the boy was wrapped in. Like I said, the Native American print was pretty common back then, but like it wasn't super, super common. So that's just a really eerie connection. So the man who ran the foster homes, he had a wife and he had a stepdaughter through that wife. And Bristow immediately made the connection that the stepdaughter, he was all like, that stepdaughter, I bet she had a child. And Bristow didn't want like everyone to know that she had gotten pregnant. So intentionally or unintentionally, the child had died and was kept a secret because they didn't want the daughter looking like she had gone and like had sex out of wedlock. So they had the child killed, or the child died by itself, and they disposed of the child with a cardboard box. What makes this even weirder is the foster father and the stepdaughter eventually got married, which is like, I don't know, kind of disturbing. But apparently the police followed up, they investigated him thoroughly, and the investigation was actually closed. So, I guess I don't know, this is kind of a far-fetched theory in my opinion, Um, I wouldn't be shocked if it was true, but I think there's kind of a lot of jumping around. I think the most credible thing is that they had a bassinet that was from JCPenney in their house that could have been the one that they found. Um, but to say that they somehow kept a hidden child while having a foster home, I don't know. I don't know if I buy it completely, but hey, the next theory is pretty crazy, and I believe in that one. So let's get into the second one. Theory two, which deals with Martha. So in 2002, which is pretty present day, this grown woman who is a businesswoman, she came to the police, and she came with the fake name, or she didn't present the fake name, but they gave her a fake name, Martha, and she said, "I have a story. It's really crazy. It's really far fetched, but you have to believe me." And the police at first were super, super skeptical, and they still are skeptical. They actually threw out her case, but just wait until you hear what she had to say because it matches up pretty completely with what had happened. They were super skeptical because she had a history of mental illness. I'm not sure what type of mental illness, but they said, listen, like she's probably not in her right mind. I don't think mental illness immediately discredits someone from presenting the truth, so I don't necessarily agree with what the police had to say about that. But anyway, to get into what Martha said. Martha said she had an abusive mother who had purchased a boy whose name was Jonathan in 1954. And Martha's abusive mother was horrible. Like, she beat this boy, she sexually abused him, and she did this for about 2.5 years. And Martha said that the boy was mentally disabled and was nonverbal. So Martha's mother was just insanely cruel and would do this to Martha too, but more so to Jonathan. So one evening, according to Martha, Jonathan had a dinner of baked beans, which is important, and I guess he wasn't feeling okay, he vomited the baked beans. And the mother got super angry. She took Jonathan and she beat his head against the tile floor. And apparently after that, like, Jonathan was, of course, super, super injured. He was, like, laying on the ground. He could barely move. And the mother was kind of, like, shook. She was like, oh, gosh. So she went and she tried bathing the child to get the blood off or whatever. And when he was, like, in the bathtub, he finally passed away. And what makes Martha's story so credible is she provided a lot of very specific details that were only known to the police. Like, there was no way that Martha could have known this other than if she was, like, present in his life. So one of the details was he had eaten black beans, or not black beans, baked beans. So when the police did an autopsy on the boy, they found that in his stomach there was baked beans, meaning that his last meal was in fact baked beans. Additionally, in his esophagus, there was black residue, which indicates that he had thrown up recently. So her saying that he had puked the baked beans was probably true. Another thing that matched up was that his hands were water wrinkled, even though he had no contact with water in nature, as far as the police know. So him being in the bath, like, was a pretty plausible, or it was at least possible, possibility. So after the boy had died, the mom was like, "Oh no, what am I gonna do?" And what the mother did was she cut his hair. So originally he had really long hair, made him almost look like a girl, and the mom was all like, "Oh, people will recognize him if I, like, braid his body when he has long hair." So she cut it really, really short, which explains for, like, the impromptu haircut. And the mother actually made Martha assist in dumping the body into, like, the hillside. And while they were dumping this body from a box, there was a motorist that pulled up next to them to help, and he was all like, "Hey, do you want some help? It looks like you're struggling." And the mom told Martha to stand in front of the license plate so the man couldn't see it. And the mom was all like, "No, no, I'm fine, we're fine." And finally, the motorist, like, he drove away, but he did report to the police what he had seen. And his story corroborates exactly to Martha's, and Martha had, like, there was no way that anyone had known about this motorist's testimony because it was held confidentially. Sorry, I'm reading right now. So what does prove Martha wrong, or doesn't prove Martha wrong, but discredits her story, is that all of the neighbors were interviewed. All of the surviving neighbors at the time were interviewed, that lived in the neighborhood, and they had said they had never seen a boy, not even one with long hair, that had lived at that house, and they said it was ridiculous. Martha was lying, and the last thing that really shows that Martha could have been telling the truth, I don't want to say probably because I have no idea, but could have been telling the truth, is that they checked his head and there were like bruise marks or whatever that indicates that his head was bashed into something when he had died. So those are the only two theories. I know this video was short, but it's a pretty graphic and horrible story. And it's probably one we're never going to know the answers to because it happened so long ago. The police actually released a statement saying that if the crime had been committed in even the 1970s or 80s, it would have been probably solved because they had been like establishing a national DNA collection between the police units, and the police would have been like expanded to neighboring cities, and it would have been like more of a national case. But unfortunately, it was only limited to Philadelphia and the surrounding states. So I hope you enjoyed this. Well, not enjoyed, but I hope you were interested by this, the mystery of the boy of the box. And actually, you can go visit his grave. It's in Philadelphia. They had originally buried him in a potter's grave, which is like an unnamed grave, which I think was incredibly disrespectful because like this poor boy had died and been like brutally murdered. But then they actually moved him to a pretty nice grave. So that's silver lining. Yes, but stay tuned for some more videos.